Over the past 2 months, I watched the entire Rocky franchise for the very first time in anticipation for Creed 3, and let me tell you right now, it was 100% worth it. Hey guys, welcome back to the video. In this video, guys, my spoiler-free review for Creed 3. This is the third installment in the Creed franchise and the 9th installment in the overall Rocky franchise, and like I said before, I watched every single movie in this franchise for the very first time this year, so expect a full ranking for all 9 movies in this franchise later this weekend, and expect a lot more Creed content this weekend as well with tier lists and rankings. So make sure to subscribe button so you don't miss any time I upload a video or I go live. But don't waste any more time. Let's get right into it. I want to start off with the biggest standout in this entire movie, and it's not a specific performance or a specific theme or story point or anything like that. It's the direction by Michael B. Jordan. This is his directorial debut, and let me tell you, it is absolutely amazing. This is some of the best direction I've seen, honestly, in the past few years. It's so creative and unique, and maybe I'm just overrating this directorial debut because it's a debut, and I've seen Michael B. Jordan in a lot of amazing movies, but I've never seen him behind the camera. But what I love so much about his directorial debut in Creed 3 is that it takes the perfect elements from Creed 1 and 2, but it goes ahead and elevates it to a whole other level. Also, this franchise has been going on for decades and decades and decades, starting off with Rocky 1, but they somehow keep reinventing in every single movie the story. But this time, they don't only reinvent the story, but they also reinvent the action, the set pieces, the themes, the story. It never feels like they're kind of going back to something that worked before. I do think in terms of overall pacing and the vibe of like how the fights take place, who's the underdog and who has better chances and stuff like that, I think in that sense, sometimes it does get just slightly predictable, but that is going to happen whenever you have 9 movies all taking place for the same sport with similar characters. But what Michael B. Jordan does here with his directorial debut is absolutely insane. It's so creative and it's so special, and especially going into that final fight, which is arguably the best fight of the entire franchise in my opinion. I do think there's one fight in the second movie that it was more of an emotional fight in my opinion, and so I really like that one. But in terms of just raw power on a technical level as well, what it means for the story, the visual representations, the action in this movie is just absolutely unmatched. They take advantage of what the modern day technology can do in this Creed franchise. I mean, obviously, you start off with Rocky, and I'll talk more about this in my ranking video, but I definitely feel like the original Rocky movie, it's a very basic story, and I think everyone can agree on that. But for me, every single movie since the original Rocky movie has innovated on some aspect. This movie innovates on all aspects, not only from the Creed movies, but also the entire Rocky franchise. And there's 3 big fights in this movie, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm going to be honest, I love the detail that these fights have. From the very beginning, you were instantly thrown into this fully filmed in IMAX fight scene that has amazing color coordination, and again, that leads right back into the director's show with Michael B. Jordan. You have so much, not only color coordination, but also framing. Every single technical aspect is just absolutely insane. You have really creative moments. There's one specific thing that I absolutely love with the first 2 Creed movies is a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have the opponent on one side and then they'll have Creed on the other side, and they'll have, it seems like some sort of dolly robot arm, and it basically just zooms past both sides. And they did this one move in Creed 2 across the actual ropes, and it's so well done. I have no idea how they executed it, but that moment that blew me away in Creed 2 is just what every single fight scene is like in Creed 3. It feels like 2 superheroes trading blows for however many fights we have in this movie between our 2 main characters. I'm honestly just speechless at how well this movie was executed on an action level. Every fight scene is filmed on an IMAX camera, of course, but also they take advantage of the visual spectacle that you can do nowadays. I think the visual spectacle, of course, goes into cinematography. There's so many visual cues in this movie, and this is gonna kind of get into spoilers, just very little. So skip to the timestamp on the screen right now if you don't want anything spoiled, but I'm going to just quickly talk about a really cool cinematography visual effects thing they do. But in the very final battle, they kind of transform the stage that Damien and Adonis are fighting on. So they're fighting in a big stadium. I'm not going to spoil what stadium it is because I thought it was really cool the way they introduced all of it. But what I really, really love about it is that they have this one moment where they're in the middle of the fight. It's some middle round. It's not the very end of the fight, and it's not the very beginning, somewhere in the middle. But in order to pass time, but also give us absurdly good visual cues, they kind of transform the stage to where it's only both of them in an empty arena. And it is some of the best visual and story integration I think I've ever seen. Again, I don't want to talk anymore about that because it is kind of spoiler territory, and I'm not going to get into why they do it or what implications it has and stuff like that. But that is one of the best moments in any sports movie, in my opinion, ever. But moving on from that, I want to talk about the story and the acting and the themes. I kind of want to group all of this together because I feel like they all go very hand in hand. Like I've been saying repeatedly in this video, this movie is such a fresh take on this franchise that could get stale very, very easily. One of the main reasons why I think Creed 1 reinvents the wheel so far is because of Michael B. Jordan's character and the way that he kind of puts himself into Creed and the way that you feel the humanizing aspect of him. Of course, not all of us can relate to our fathers being world famous boxers that died in the ring against some Russian dude. But what we can relate to are the themes that are present in every single one of the Rocky movies. From about just being a man to actually being vulnerable and understanding the people around you, what you're responsible for. I think even since the first Creed movie, Adonis has transformed so much, and this movie really feels like the perfect culmination of all of the story and the themes. I don't know what everyone else thinks about this movie just yet because I watched it a day or two early, and so I don't know the general consensus about the themes and what everyone thinks about all of them, but for me, this movie was mostly about vulnerability and honestly masculinity and kind of leaving things behind and never actually coming to terms with them because you're just scared of what the implications of that are. And so as someone who has struggles with vulnerability, I think this movie does an amazing job of representing that, not only throughout the entirety of the movie, but also just that final battle. The two guys just being opposite of each other in a ring that's completely empty. It's so powerful. And I love the way that this movie represents these themes. And in some ways it's really subtle, in other ways it's really not. You obviously have two very different sides of the spectrum with Adonis and Damien, but the way that they go about telling these two stories and making them collide and all of the backstory and tidbits that you get throughout the movie, I really just, again, I love the execution of this story because it can get stale really quickly, but it doesn't. I want to talk about Damien for just a little bit because I will have a full video talking about Jonathan Majors' performances later this week on the channel because I want to rank all of his major performances because I'm a massive fan of his. He is arguably the best working actor right now. I think he's top 2, right behind Robert Pattinson in my opinion, maybe even above, but you guys will have to wait to see my video on ranking his performances for that. But in this movie, he is stellar. I mean, paired with Ryan Coogler's writing, Michael B. Jordan's direction, Jonathan Majors feels like just the whipped cream on this movie. He feels like that cherry on top of just I don't know what his character does. I mean, he does it with every role, to be honest. Even looking at like Kang the Conqueror, he's completely evil. He has like no chill at all, but you have this sense of nuance in his performance, this soul that's in his eyes, and it makes you want to root for him to an extent. You understand his backstory, and I think that's also where the screenplay of this movie really excels, is it lets you understand Jonathan Majors' character. As for the overall screenplay, I think it is a little bit too tight. I feel like they could have loosened it up a little bit, given us more story on pretty much all elements, because at times it does just feel like an overly complicated montage. But I love how they can play into the same formula of what these villains are doing, their arcs, and how they actually get put into these movies in these situations, but they mix it up enough. And I think Jonathan Majors really is just that X factor in this film. Final thing I want to talk about, which is a very big topic of discussion when it comes to Creed 3, is that Rocky is not in this movie at all. They mention his name name once, and Michael B. Jordan recites one of his lines, which I won't spoil, but he recites it before the final fight, which is absolutely awesome. He's like mumbling it, so I don't know if like everyone caught it, but he does say a really important line that was in the first two Creed movies that Rocky said, but there's no actual Sylvester Stallone in this movie. And obviously there was the behind the scenes problems, but I didn't really have a problem with him not being in this movie. I found it odd the way that they didn't address it, but I think for how detailed and honestly deep these themes are between Majors' character and Jordan's character, I think it works. I think there's enough of a filling in of that gap of Rocky not being there with these other characters that are not only super compelling, but just entertaining to watch on screen, that it kind of fills in the gap that Rocky left. Of course, I miss Sylvester Stallone. I wish he was in this movie. It's not like I don't want him to be in this movie, but also if you have him in this movie, you just basically have to cut down Jonathan Majors' time in half, or Creed's time, or Adonis's time in half, and that doesn't really work here in my opinion. This movie would not be nearly as good as it is if you cut down any of those performances screen times, because what is at the core of this movie is the dynamic duo. It's the relationship between these two characters, the performances they have bouncing off of one another, and Sylvester Stallone isn't going to come in here for a very light role or a cameo. He's not going to do that. He needs to be a main side character, and that's kind of where Jonathan Majors' character I feel like would just get shoved to the side. So to a certain extent, I'm kind of happy that Sylvester Stallone wasn't in this movie. At the end of the day, I absolutely love Creed 3. It's an amazing directorial debut by Michael B. Jordan, and it also just implements every amazing part of the Rocky franchise so far, with all of the amazing technical aspects that are possible for movies nowadays, creating some of the best action I've also seen, honestly, ever. Aside from all the technical elements, the story and the themes are absolutely perfect and are only boosted by the amazing performances by Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan. I'm going to give Creed 3 an 8.5 out of 10. And honestly, I hope to rewatch it very, very soon. So don't be surprised if it bumps up to a 9 out of 10. Also, remember, I'll be dropping my Rocky franchise ranked, as well as a bunch of other Rocky franchise videos in the next few days. So subscribe so you don't miss that. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.